My beloved child. Something happened last night that your person never intended their family to witness. They walked into that gathering carrying emotions they had been holding down for far too long, and almost immediately, everyone could tell something was different. Their voice was unsteady. Their face carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent hours fighting with their own thoughts. A relative quietly asked if they were okay, expecting a simple answer. Instead, your person froze. Then your name came up. Not casually. Not accidentally. They started talking about you with an intensity that changed the entire room. Someone tried to interrupt, but that only made them more emotional. And then they said one sentence about what happened between you that caused two people at the table to exchange a stunned look. Why? Because apparently, part of your story had already been discussed inside this family, but your person had never known. The gathering suddenly became uncomfortable. One family member tried to calm your person down and suggested they talk privately, but they refused to pretend anymore. For months, they had allowed everyone to believe they were moving forward, that whatever existed between you was finished, and that your name no longer carried weight. Last night shattered that illusion. Your person admitted they had been thinking about you far more than anyone realized. They confessed that certain memories still followed them into quiet moments, and every attempt to ignore those feelings had only made them stronger. But then an older relative asked a question that completely changed the direction of the conversation. Do you know what was actually said about them? Your person went silent. Suddenly, this wasn't only about feelings. There was information being kept from them. Don't skip, because what happened next explains why your person became even more shaken. Your person demanded to know what the family member meant, and for several seconds nobody answered. That silence told them everything. Something had happened behind their back. Eventually, one relative admitted there had been a private conversation about you some time ago, a conversation involving people whose opinions had influenced your person more than you ever knew. But before they could explain exactly what had been decided, another family member stepped in and warned them not to reveal it there. That was when your person lost their composure completely. They asked why everyone seemed to know something about you except them. Then they said something nobody expected: if someone in that family had interfered, hidden information, or deliberately pushed them away from you, they wanted the truth immediately. And just when the room seemed unable to become more tense, one person finally spoke up and admitted, "There is something we never told you about why the two of you were pulled apart." What they revealed next was not what your person had been expecting at all. For a moment, your person simply stared across the room, waiting for someone to explain what those words really meant. The gathering had gone completely quiet. Then one relative finally admitted that months ago, when your person was confused about you, certain family members had encouraged that confusion instead of helping them understand it. They had heard things about you, made assumptions, and passed those assumptions along as though they were facts. Your person suddenly realized that some of the doubts they had carried were never completely their own. But there was something even more disturbing. One person at that gathering had known the information was questionable from the beginning, and had remained silent. Your person turned toward them and asked the question nobody wanted to answer: "Why didn't you tell me?" That relative struggled to respond, and your person became more emotional. They weren't angry simply because people had talked about you. They were shaken because those conversations may have influenced decisions that changed everything between you. Then another family member revealed something unexpected. After seeing how deeply your person was affected by losing you, they had started questioning whether the family had made a serious mistake. Apparently, your person had been mentioning you in small ways for months without even realizing it. Comparing places to somewhere connected with you. Going quiet when certain memories surfaced. Becoming distant whenever someone suggested meeting somebody new. Stay till the end, because the family had noticed something your person had desperately tried to hide. Their feelings for you had never disappeared. Then came the detail that changed the entire atmosphere. One relative admitted they had recently discovered something about the original story that had caused everyone to judge your connection so quickly. A crucial piece had been misunderstood. Your person immediately demanded to know what it was, but the relative hesitated, saying they needed to explain where the information had actually come from first. That hesitation made your person suspicious. They asked whether someone outside the family had deliberately influenced what everyone believed about you. Nobody answered immediately. Then an older family member slowly looked toward someone sitting at the other end of the room and said, "You should tell them. This started with what you brought into this family." Your person turned toward that individual, and suddenly realized they recognized exactly what the older relative was talking about. Your person's expression changed the second they realized who had originally brought that story into the family. This wasn't some distant relative repeating harmless gossip. It was someone they trusted. Someone whose opinion had carried enough weight to make them question what they felt for you. The person across the room tried to explain, insisting they had only shared what they believed at the time, but your person immediately asked where the information had come from. That question exposed the first crack. There was no direct conversation with you. No undeniable proof. Just something heard from another person, passed along, interpreted, and eventually treated like truth. Your person looked around the gathering as if seeing everyone differently for the first time. Then they asked, "So I made decisions about someone I cared about because of something nobody here actually verified?" And nobody could give them the answer they wanted. But the most painful revelation came from someone who had barely spoken all evening. They admitted they had questioned the story months ago because certain details simply didn't make sense. They had even considered approaching your person privately, but another family member convinced them not to interfere. That confession hit hard. Your person began connecting moments from the past, times when they almost reached out to you, times when they reconsidered walking away, and times when someone close suddenly appeared with another reason to remain distant. What if those moments hadn't been coincidences? What if your person had repeatedly been pushed toward the same conclusion? Don't skip, because that was when their emotions shifted from confusion to determination. They weren't interested in defending old decisions anymore. They wanted to know exactly what had been hidden, who benefited from the distance between you, and why nobody had corrected the story when doubts first appeared. Then the quiet relative revealed one final detail that made your person stand completely still. Recently, they had spoken with someone who knew what really happened during the period when everything between you began falling apart. That person remembered the situation very differently from the version your person's family had heard. More importantly, they had something that could settle one major question once and for all. Your person immediately asked what it was, expecting another explanation. Instead, the relative reached for their phone and said there was a message, an old message connected directly to the night when the misunderstanding about you began. Your person's voice dropped as they asked who had written it. The relative looked at them for several seconds before answering, "Before you hear this, you need to understand something. The person who sent it never expected you to find out. The phone stayed in that relative's hand for several unbearable seconds, and your person could barely contain themselves. They demanded to hear the message immediately. But before pressing play, the relative explained why it had remained hidden. The message had been sent during the exact period when your person was being told to distance themselves from you, and it contradicted one of the strongest claims the family had believed. Suddenly, the room wasn't arguing about opinions anymore. There was something real to examine. Your person listened carefully as the message revealed that the situation involving you had been described very differently before it reached the family. One crucial detail had been removed. Another had been exaggerated. And the person speaking in that old message clearly sounded worried that your person might eventually discover the full story. Your person's hands tightened. They finally understood why certain people had been so determined to keep them from asking questions. Then your person asked something nobody expected: did they know how I felt about them? The silence returned. Eventually, someone admitted that yes, the people involved knew your person's feelings for you were serious. That answer hurt more than the original misunderstanding. Because now your person wasn't only wondering whether bad information had separated you. They were wondering whether someone had intentionally used their trust against them. They started remembering conversations that once seemed protective but now sounded completely different. You'll get over them. Don't reach out. Leave the past alone. Each sentence suddenly carried another meaning. And when your person asked who had pushed hardest for them to forget you, everyone's eyes moved toward the same person. Stay with this, because that individual finally stopped defending themselves, and what they admitted was even more personal than your person expected. They confessed that they had been afraid of what would happen if your person chose you despite the family's doubts. But fear wasn't the whole reason. There had been another conversation, one your person had never heard about, where someone specifically warned that bringing you closer could change the family dynamic permanently. Your person immediately asked what that meant. Nobody wanted to explain it directly. Then the older relative who had spoken earlier finally said the family's concern was never simply about whether you were right or wrong for your person. There was something about the connection itself that made one person feel threatened by how much influence you had without even being present. Your person stared at them, confused, until the relative added one chilling detail: the night we decided you should stay away from them, someone at this table already knew you were planning to go back. That revelation stopped your person cold, because the plan to come back to you had never been announced to the family. They had kept it private, rehearsing the words they wanted to say and wondering whether you would even listen. So how had someone at that table known? Your person began asking questions faster now. Who told them? How long had they known? And what exactly had they done with that information? The relative who had been defending themselves finally admitted they had overheard a private conversation and realized your person was preparing to contact you. Instead of staying out of it, they told another family member. Within hours, your person received a warning about you, one that sounded convincing enough to make them hesitate. Suddenly, the timing made sense. That warning had arrived precisely when your person was closest to choosing you again. But your person wasn't satisfied. They asked whether the warning had been based on anything real, and this time nobody could hide behind uncertainty. One relative admitted that part of it had been speculation. They believed they were protecting your person from another heartbreak, so they presented their fears more confidently than they should have. Your person's voice softened, but somehow that made the room even more uncomfortable. They explained that everyone had assumed distance would make things easier, yet the opposite happened. They had spent months trying to convince themselves they were finished with you. They had tried burying memories, ignoring the urge to reach out, even acting unaffected whenever your name surfaced. None of it worked. And now they were learning that the decision they regretted most may have been influenced by people who never truly knew what existed between you. Then came the question that nobody had prepared for. Your person looked directly at the older relative and asked, "If you know all of this now, what do you think I should do?" The answer wasn't immediate. The older relative glanced around the gathering before saying that nobody in that room had the right to make another decision for them. But then they revealed something huge. After discovering the truth, one family member had already tried to correct the damage without telling your person. They had quietly reached out to someone connected to you, hoping to learn whether the door between you was completely closed. Your person's eyes widened. "You contacted someone about them?" they asked. The relative nodded, but what they had heard in response was the reason this entire family gathering had suddenly become far more important than anyone realized. Your person leaned forward, almost afraid to ask what that relative had discovered. The family member explained that they hadn't contacted you directly. Instead, they had spoken with someone who understood enough about the situation to confirm one important thing: the story your person had been given was incomplete. There had been hurt on both sides, but there had also been confusion neither of you fully understood at the time. Your person immediately asked the question that had been haunting them all night: had you completely moved on? The relative refused to pretend they knew your heart, but said something that made your person go silent. From what they had learned, there were still unanswered questions surrounding the way everything ended. That meant your person had been grieving something that perhaps had never received an honest ending in the first place. That was when the emotional chaos of the night finally turned into something more focused. Your person stopped arguing with the family and started questioning themselves. How many times had they wanted to reach out but allowed fear to stop them? How many conversations with you had they replayed afterward, realizing there were things they should have said differently? One relative reminded them that contacting you would not guarantee the outcome they wanted. Your person understood that. They weren't asking for guarantees anymore. They wanted the truth, even if the truth hurt. And then they admitted something the family had never heard before. Before walking into that gathering last night, they had already been thinking seriously about you. Something had happened earlier that evening that brought your memory rushing back with unusual force. Don't skip, because they hadn't entered that room emotional by accident. Someone immediately asked what had happened before the gathering. Your person hesitated, then revealed that they had come across something connected to the past, a small reminder they thought was gone. It brought back the exact moment when they almost chose honesty with you but backed away instead. That was why they arrived overwhelmed. The family conversation hadn't created those feelings, it had broken the wall holding them back. Then your person reached into their pocket and pulled out their own phone. They opened your contact, stared at it, and said they were tired of letting other people decide what they were allowed to feel. One relative quietly asked, "Are you really going to contact them tonight?" Your person didn't answer immediately. Instead, they opened an unfinished message they had apparently written before arriving, and the first line revealed they had been planning something much bigger than a simple hello. The unfinished message had been sitting on your person's phone for hours, and nobody in that room knew it existed. It didn't begin with an apology or some casual attempt to reopen conversation. It began with an admission. They had finally realized there were things about the past they should have questioned instead of simply accepting. Your person read those words silently, then looked around at the same relatives whose opinions had once influenced them. Suddenly, sending that message felt completely different. Before, they had been afraid they might be making a mistake by returning to you. Now they were afraid the real mistake had been staying away without ever discovering the truth. One family member warned them not to act while emotions were still high. Your person agreed, but then said something that surprised everyone: "I'm not reaching out because of tonight. Tonight only confirmed what I already knew." That sentence changed the mood again. Your person explained that thoughts of you had been returning long before this gathering. Small things had kept bringing them back to memories they thought they had buried, but recently those memories had become impossible to dismiss. They had started wondering what you believed happened between you. Did you think they simply stopped caring? Did you ever know how close they came to contacting you again? And most importantly, had you been carrying a completely different version of the ending all this time? Your person didn't want to arrive in your life making demands or expecting forgiveness. They wanted one honest conversation without relatives, assumptions, or outside voices standing between you. Even the family members who had resisted your connection earlier could see something had changed. This wasn't the uncontrolled emotion that had entered the gathering. This was clarity beginning to emerge from it. But before your person could decide whether to send the message, the older relative stopped them one final time. Not to discourage them. This time, it was because there was still one piece of information they needed to hear first. The relative admitted that during the earlier attempt to understand what really happened, they learned someone connected to the original misunderstanding had recently changed their story. That person was now willing to explain what they knew, and why they had stayed silent for so long. Your person lowered the phone and asked the obvious question: "Why now?" The older relative answered that circumstances had changed, and the